here with us to get the latest information to help your clients. As everyone is getting settled in, I'll take just a moment to orient you a bit. I'm Victoria. I'm on the PESI team that plans trainings, and I'll be moderating this morning's keynote session. You'll see some other moderators as we go through the next 2 days. With so many clinicians on live today, the chat feature in Zoom will be off, but in a little while we'll turn on the Q&A. When we do, please enter content-related questions for our presenters there. But before you do, please see if someone else already asked your question, and if they did, upvote it instead of asking again. That helps the moderators know which questions to ask. Any technical or other questions for PESI, please take a look at the FAQ tab in your portal. If you have questions about continuing education credits, check the CE tab in your portal. And if you didn't already sign up for a CE upgrade package, you can still do so for live credits if you're planning on staying with us all day today and tomorrow. Or if you can't watch the full training live, you can pre-order the self-study version. In your portal are also your handouts and a virtual store chock full of more training resources. Take a look at those anytime. So let's get started. I'm so pleased to introduce our keynote speaker today, Sal Gonzalez, a Marine who signed up after 9/11. I'll let him tell you more, about his military service and the aftermath. We met Sal through Wounded Warrior Project. You may have seen him there, or perhaps on NBC's America's Got Talent, or on the TV show Nashville, or on stage with any number of other stars. I'll let him share his music with you too. Without further ado, Sal Gonzalez, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks, Victoria. It's such a pleasure to be here speaking to mental health professionals. I've had a long history of struggles with my own mental health, and my talk is about radical gratitude because I feel like I've always been grateful for the gifts that I've been given in life. One of which is the ability to play music and write my feelings down on paper and get them out. I attribute my continued survival through post-traumatic stress and survivor's guilt to my music, because if I didn't have music, I think I would have been one of the 22 veterans a day that commit suicide every single day. This song I wrote with a couple of other veterans. I woke up one morning, as you do as a songwriter in Nashville, and I went to my friend's house to go write a song, and he met me at the door with a bottle of vodka and a gallon of orange juice, and he said, "You want a screwdriver?" And it was 8 or 9 in the morning, and I knew something rough had been going down that day. And as it turns out, a good friend of his and our other co-writer had committed suicide the week before. So we sat down and we penned this song called Whiskey on the Ground. You can find it on my album Heroes, that's out everywhere. Everywhere music is sold digitally, you can stream it, all that stuff. Sitting here half drunk and my gums are numb, just 2 of the vices I have. Between the cocaine and whiskey, they're both half in me. A stranger's asleep on bed. The hot sun cuts through the windows as I reach for my pack of smokes. If you live the hell that I've been through, maybe you'd try to hide from it too. So I'm chasing demons one shot at a time, 'cause when I'm cold sober they live in my mind, showing me things that I don't want to see, and taking me places I don't want to be. next time I'm sober, I'll be 6 foot down. But even then, don't let it be over. Pour some whiskey on the ground. Whiskey on the ground. When I came home, they said I needed help. But pills and this alcohol don't mix too well. So I chased the people who loved me away with no hesitation to self-medicate. Your PhD, man, that don't mean a thing. Yes, you held a rifle out there next to me. I'm chasing demons one shot at a time. 'Cause when I'm cold sober, they live in my mind, showing me things that I don't want to see, and taking me places I don't want to be. The next time I'm sober, I'll be 6 foot down. But even then, don't let it be over. Pour some whiskey on the ground. Whiskey on the ground. I'm chasing demons one shot at a time. Thank you. I've had the ability to do that since I was about 12 years old. My father was a bass player by trade growing up, and him and my mother instilled a love of music in me very early. They also instilled in me a love for this country, not by telling me that I should be patriotic or how good we had it here, but just by taking me back to where they grew up and where they were from in Mexico. I remember vividly being 7 or 8 years old, visiting my cousins in Mexico and seeing my younger cousin wearing my Mickey Mouse shirt that I loved, and telling my mom, "Hey mom, he's got that, why does he have my shirt?" And my mother telling me, "Well, he needs it more than you do." And we send them clothes and money and all sorts of stuff, and they don't have all the opportunities that we have in the place where we live. My mother was a waitress growing up, and knowing that her meager salary not only fed and clothed us, but fed and clothed a lot of our family back in Mexico, made me very grateful to be born in a country that could do that, that could provide for our family. My father got me up on stage when I was 3 or 4 years old. He was playing my aunt's wedding, and he got me up on stage with his band, and he played a song called La Bamba. Para bailar la bamba. And he let me sing that song with him on stage when I was 4, and he created a monster. I've been chasing that high ever since, which is why I play music professionally for a living. And I never wanted to do anything other than make people happy by playing and singing for them. And that all changed on September 11th of 2001. I was in English class. I was in high school. And somebody barged into our room and said, "Turn on the television, something crazy's going on." And as the TV turned on, we watched the Twin Towers fall. And I knew that my country that I loved so dearly was going to war, and I needed to do my part. You know, boxing and fighting is the #2 sport in Mexico. And I think we're just, as a culture, we're natural fighters. So When it was my time to sign up, I qualified for every job in the Marine Corps. I could have done anything, intelligence, I could have fixed trucks, I could have done any job, and I chose to be an infantryman. For those who don't know, an infantryman is the people that are on the front lines fighting. I was a machine gunner. I went off to boot camp on October 21st of 2003, and I raised my right hand and I joined the United States Marine Corps. After 3 months of boot camp and a few months of infantry training, I was a full-fledged machine gunner in the United States Marine Corps, and I was stationed with 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. It's one of the most decorated battalions in the Marine Corps. Not for anything I ever did, but because we stand on the shoulders of giants. And a little less than a year after that, after I initially joined, I found myself in a place called Ar Ramadi, Iraq. I was only in Iraq for 2 months, but in those 2 months, I got blown up 7 times. 6 of those times, they were doing good to scratch my paint or pop a tire. Our armor was really good on the trucks. But on October 31st of 2004, for those of us who are counting, that's 1 year and 10 days after I enlisted, I was hit by the 7th bomb of that deployment. We were escorting what we like to call beans, bullets, and Band-Aids, supplies, to some Marines that were further away from base than we were. And on the way there, we were attacked, ambushed, but we were able to push through and get our mission done. And as we came back, we were returning, I remember thinking that I was going to try and boost the morale of myself and my friends by taking some cigarette ashes and painting myself like a cat and just being silly for Halloween, because Halloween's my favorite holiday. Has been ever since I was a little kid. And I never got the chance. We came out of the gate and we drove about a couple hundred yards. When we came across my favorite part of the city, there was this little roundabout that had a beautiful little flower garden there. It was full of different colored flowers, yellow and purple. And I loved driving by that place every chance I got. But on this day, as we drove past it, it went boom. Now, I'd been blown up 6 times before this. I felt like I kind of knew what I was doing. But this time was different. This time I woke up inside the Humvee, which was new. And what the bad guys were doing at the time was they would disable one of our vehicles. And as we were trying to get casualties out, they would attack again to try and create more casualties. So like any good machine gunner, I reached up to my turret and I tried to pull myself back up and start engaging the enemy. And my right leg worked perfectly fine. It did everything I asked it to. It got up under me and it started helping me up. And it was about that time that I noticed my left leg wasn't responding the way it should have. And when I looked down, it was bent in an angle that it normally didn't bend at. And I knew I was going to have a rough day. So I did what Marines do best, and that's lay back and let the Navy take care of us. The Marine Corps does not have a medical field. We rely on Navy medics to do all of our medicine for us. So Doc Culata, as we called him, pulled me out of the Humvee and saved my life that day. Doc Culata is a Filipino American, and he spoke heavily accented English that most of my Caucasian Marine friends found hard to understand. But as a Mexican American, he talked a lot like my mom, so it was really easy for me to get it. Doc Culata pulled me out of the Humvee and popped me full of morphine, which I recommend highly if you're ever traumatically injured in such a fashion. I went from some of the worst pain I'd ever felt in my life to high-fiving my friends, telling them I'd be back in a week. It didn't turn out that way. I was rushed to a field hospital, and they worked on me for a number of hours until I finally fell asleep. I say fell asleep, but when I woke up, I realized it wasn't a normal sleep. I woke up in a hospital bed surrounded by my parents and my siblings. And I had some questions for them. Number one, what the heck are you guys doing in Iraq? And number two, where's my rifle? Where's my weapon? A Marine goes nowhere unarmed. And they calmly informed me that I wasn't in Iraq. I was in Bethesda, Maryland. I was home and I was safe, but I'd been in a coma for a week. Both of my lungs had collapsed. I had almost died a few times, but the Navy did its job. They took care of me. They saved my life, and I was well. After 3 months of trying to save my leg, the doctors and I decided to amputate my left leg below the knee. The bomb had liquefied about 1.5 inches of bone and nerve and tissue. So it was pretty far beyond saving, but we tried for 3 months. And then they sent me to San Antonio, Texas, which is the leading amputee place in the country. And they gave me a leg and said, don't wear it for longer than like 4 hours at a time. Your leg is going to be raw. And if you get sores, you won't be able to wear your prosthetic. And after 3 or 4 months of not being able to walk, I wore that leg for 72 hours the first time. They gave it to me on a Thursday, and that Friday night, I went to a bar in San Antonio, Texas, called Cowboys Dance Hall and Saloon, and I learned how to two-step dance in the style that Texans do. Those are some of the happiest times of my life. When I retired in 2005, at the end of 2005, I went home to Los Angeles and quickly realized that LA traffic was not conducive to post-traumatic stress. I was angry at everybody all of the time, much more so behind the wheel of a car. And I knew that I needed to change. And I came to be friends with a Marine while in the hospital named Ryan Autry. He grew up here in Nashville, Tennessee. And I came to visit him for a week. And I spent that week playing music and having a good time, and realized that I could still pursue the thing that I wanted to do. And I could do it in a place that was more conducive to my mental health. So I quickly moved to Nashville, and I've been here ever since. That was sort of the beginning of my troubles. I fell into a dark place. While I was in combat, my unit, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, lost 15 Marines. 15 Marines were killed in action, and 10 of those were my friends. 10 of those people came from my company. Those 10 men were closer than brothers. I like to tell people that if you've ever played a sport, you kind of understand that camaraderie that you get. But you take that feeling and you 100x it, and then you kind of get the sense of the way we feel toward each other. We're closer than family, thicker than blood. My lieutenant, Matthew D. Lynch, from Long Island, New York, was killed in the explosion that took my leg. And I felt guilty for breathing. I remember turning 24 and realizing that I was going to be older than he would ever be. And that sent me into a pretty dark spiral of self-medication and drinking and extracurricular activities, as we like to call them. But I lost more years of my life than I would like to admit to that behavior. But around 2008 or 2009, Wounded Warrior Project called. See, they were the second people to visit me in the hospital after I came out of my coma. And they gave me a backpack full of clothes that they called comfort items. What most people don't know is when you get injured overseas, they cut every piece of personal property off of your body, and you end up in a sterile hospital room being poked and prodded by strangers a couple thousand miles away from home in a borrowed hospital gown that gives off a show whenever you walk down the halls. So having a t-shirt meant a lot. Having shorts and socks, which last me twice as long as normal folks now, really meant a lot. It brought a lot of comfort, and it made a lot of sense that they would call those things comfort items. So when they called in 2009, I answered the phone, which wasn't my habit. I stayed away from anything having to do with veterans or my history because I felt so guilty. But these people that had done so much for me in the hospital called, and how was I going to turn them down? So I said yes, and I went to this event called Soldier Ride, where I rode with 40 other veterans who were all going through similar things. They were all missing limbs or had been blown up and injured in some fashion. We'd all been through the exact same things, and we were all struggling with the exact same struggles. But whereas I had an excuse, I had a really good excuse. I was trying to be a rock star. What are rock stars known for? Excess. These people were not trying to be any of that. And yet they were all self-medicating, self-isolating, and just generally having a rough time of it. Now, as a musician, as somebody who's in show business, it's hard to believe, but we don't have a high opinion of ourselves. It's kind of a low self-esteem thing, which is why we jump on stage, which is why we seek that approval from strangers. And for all those years, I never would have lifted a finger to help myself because I didn't have a high opinion of myself. But all of a sudden, my friends were going through the same things. And for them, I would move heaven and earth. So I started maintaining friendships with these people and basically being a peer support group for each other. We would call each other and keep each other accountable. Hey, I had one less bottle of whiskey this week than I normally do. Or, hey, I quit drinking whiskey and I'm just drinking beer now. Or, hey, I've all but cut alcohol out of my life. And we just cheered each other on, and slowly but surely we all got better. That's not to say we didn't struggle, because I sure as heck did, but I was lucky in that I had my mother to lean on. I would call her and ask her about her life because she had a really rough upbringing. She was born in 1957. I'm sure she's going to be angry that I said that year. But when she was 12, her father passed away due to an illness, and she had to go to work, being the oldest of 9 siblings. She had to go to work to help put food on the table for the rest of the family. And with the money that she could make, she wasn't able to feed everybody. So they sent my 3 oldest uncles to an orphanage where they were fed and clothed and they learned a trade. And so whenever I asked her how she would get through things, she said, it always gets better, son. There's never a tunnel too dark. We have to be grateful for all of the things that we have. And luckily, I was always, I think through her influence, I always kind of looked on the bright side of things. The sock thing was from the get-go. I've always thought of it that way. The Marine Corps actually offered me a position to stay and retire by being a Marine liaison there in the hospitals and helping be a good influence on the rest of my Marines. But I was in such a hurry to move on with my life that I turned that down. I remember a few years ago, I was a new father and I was having a lot of trouble sleeping. And I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in military training on how to function at a very high level on very little sleep. None of that training prepared me to be nice also. And as any parent can tell you, that is a real struggle. And I called her one day and I said, Mom, how do you handle this? And she goes, well, one day your baby boy is gonna move out and he's no longer gonna ask you for help. And one day he might move a couple thousand miles across the country and you might not get to see him every day. And so one day you will miss those sleepless nights. And I knew she was right. I knew she was absolutely correct. And yet again, that radical gratitude that she always had rubbed off on me. She told me a story once after she told me about her life and all of the hardships that she'd had to endure just to get us to this country, to live here. And I asked her how could she possibly keep the silver lining in focus? And she replied, well, when I was left alone to provide for the family, there were days when I had to come home and play with my sisters in the backyard to get our minds off of how hungry we were. She goes, and you don't know what that feels like. And for that, I'm truly grateful. And so whenever I think of hard times, whenever I'm going through hard times, I sit and I think about that fact and I count my blessings. I was blessed to be born in a family of resilient people. I was blessed to have picked up a guitar at 12 and learned to play music. I was blessed to have the father that I did that was able to teach those skills to me of music. My father wasn't a great father. He wasn't around all the time, but he did give me that one gift. And to that, I'll always be grateful for him. Now, 10 years ago, I started working for Wounded Warrior Project as a speaker. As it turns out, being a musician and playing in front of hundreds of people is kind of a gateway into public speaking. Public speaking is the number one fear amongst humans. And apparently I was born without shame because I can do it fairly easily without too much adrenaline. I walked into the Wounded Warrior Project office and I didn't have a job. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I said, hey, I need a job. And they sat me down. There's a program called Warriors to Work where they help you write out a resume and help you find work. And the young lady that was helping me said, you know, there's a position here at Wounded Warrior Project that I think you'd be perfect for. And out of 400 or so applicants, me and 10 others were chosen. And over the last 10 years, me and one other person are left doing this job. It's a hard job talking about your darkest times in life and reliving those things. But I attribute my ability to go to therapy to this job. Because if I didn't start talking about it, I never would have got over it. A few years ago, I started seeing my therapist, Dr. Channing, and I was having struggles. I was seeing a lot of my anger come out in my own son. He was 3 or 4 at the time, and he was stomping his feet, angry at the planet. And I knew that it was all my doing, because who else could it have come from? Not my wife. I married up. And so I went to therapy, and I was given a lot of tools on how to handle my anger from Buddhist teachings, from Pema Chodron and Thich Nhat Hanh, to the Chinese practice of Wu Wei. And none of that would have been possible, number one, without the music, and number two, without this job at Wounded Warrior Project. This organization does a lot of things for veterans all across this country. We have 15 different programs, Warriors to Work. There's that Soldier Ride program that I told you about earlier. There's, if you're a veteran and you've ever had to navigate the VA, you can understand how much of a nightmare that is. And there's a program that helps with that. There's tons of things, all free of charge to our veterans. And people ask me all the time, like, what does Wounded Warrior Project do? And I could give you numbers and statistics and all the different people that we help in the different ways, but I find that stories really tell the tale. I was at a high school in West Virginia on Veterans Day just a few years ago, and this young lady walked up to me and she said, my mom is a veteran and she wants to talk to you. And I said, okay. And this gal walked up to me, who was way too young to have a child in high school. But she told me about her 2 deployments to Afghanistan, her deployment to Iraq, and how she was struggling now that she was home because her husband was a civilian. Her kids were teenagers, and a nightmare. If anybody has teenagers at home, you can attest to that. And nobody understood the things that she was going through, but I did. And she told me in no uncertain terms that she was going to go home and try and end her life. She was on her last leg, no pun intended. And so I grabbed her by the hand and I took her into a conference room, and I got her on the phone with my friends at Wounded Warrior Project, and they got her on the suicide hotline. And I'm a dirty hippie musician. I'm not a mental health expert or anything. I happen to know a lot of good folks that are. And I'm happy to say that young lady still has a mom to go home to. So that's what we do at Wounded Warrior Project. we help save lives, much like you folks. Everybody listening today helps save lives. And for that, I would like to say thank you. Because again, I'm lucky that I had music to turn to. But there's an awful lot of folks that don't. And you help those people. And for you, I am eternally grateful. I'm going to play a song for you. Going back to this radical gratitude thing, gratitude in the face of any adversity and counting your blessings and knowing that you are lucky regardless of how you feel about it. I was at a benefit for a young man who had lost his father in Afghanistan. His name is Christian Gazinski. His dad, Mark, was killed in Afghanistan, and we were raising money to send this young man off to a really nice private school. And I was sitting there talking with him, wearing shorts because I like attention. And we were talking about what his plans were for life and what he wanted me to call him. Christian wanted me to call him Ski because that's what all of his dad's friends called his dad. And it was right around the time that he said that this older veteran walked up to me. He was the quintessential picture of a Vietnam veteran. He had the hat and the thing and the tattoos and just old and grizzled. And he came up to me, he shook my hand and he said, "Son, thank you for your service. You are a hero." And that word didn't sit right with me. It didn't sit right with me because my heroes are the 15 men that died in Iraq in 2004 and 5. I was just doing my job. My heroes were men like Mark Gazinski, Little Ski's dad. And so being the songwriter that I am, sensitive little man that I am, I went home and I wrote a song. And I say I wrote it, but I sat in my kitchen and put pen to paper, and I don't remember any of it. I woke up with this song about 15 minutes later. And this song has led me to do a lot of fun things, a lot of cool things in the music industry. I've opened for everybody and their mother in the country music business, from Taylor Swift to Charlie Daniels, Lone Star to Aaron Lewis. And the greatest compliment I've ever gotten as a songwriter came from a man named Trace Adkins. He's a Grammy Award-winning artist. And I opened for him at a benefit concert for Wounded Warrior Project. He heard this song, and when he got on stage, he goes, "Man, I wish I'd have wrote that." And as a artist, as a songwriter, as a musical person, having somebody with that accolade say those words meant a lot. This song got me on the show America's Got Talent. It led me to my appearances on the show Nashville, and everywhere I've been. I don't think I would have gotten as much of attention for my music if it wouldn't have been for this song. And so I'm going to share it with you. And then afterwards, I think we're going to open it up to some Q&A. If you're a veteran, I hope you like this song. And if you're not a veteran, it really kind of doesn't matter. That's the wrong key, excuse me. They threw him a party the day that he got home. Oh, and they called him a hero, but he felt all alone. Surrounded by his family and all his friends but one. Oh, he lost him in that country to a buried roadside bomb. When his dad stood up and said, "Our hero has returned," he looked down at his scars and his purple heart and said, "Dad, you know that hurts. 'Cause I don't mean to not sound grateful, 'cause the good Lord knows I am, for sparing me my life on the day he took my friend. I still wish that I had gone with him, maybe even took his place. Oh, but destiny didn't lead me that way. So I'm not trying to say you're wrong, but heroes ain't the ones who make it home." He said Danny had a daughter that he'll never get to see, and I know that he was proud, but he was only 23. And they gave me this medal painted on my uniform, but this piece of tin don't mean a thing, no, if it can't bring 'em home. So I don't mean to not sound grateful, 'cause the good Lord knows I am, for sparing me my life on the day he took my friend. I still wish that I had gone with him, maybe even took his place. Oh, but destiny didn't lead me that way. So I'm not trying to say you're wrong, but heroes ain't the ones who make it home. No, no. So I don't mean to not sound grateful, 'cause the good Lord knows I am, for sparing me my life on the day he took my friends. But I still wish that I'd gone with him, every day I'd take their place. Oh, but destiny didn't lead me that way. So I'm not trying to say you're wrong, maybe just a little bit, 'cause heroes ain't the ones who make it home. Thank you, folks. So with that, Victoria, if we want to jump on and maybe take some questions, comments, concerns.
Yes, I might need a second. That was so moving. I want to try to be the voice of the reactions that you're seeing here, which are so appreciative of you sharing your art with us and the background to the reasons why this is what your art looks and sounds like. Thank you so much for playing that song for us and the earlier song, and for being here and being vulnerable and telling us your story, which I think helps us all to be more empathically attuned to the clients that we work with.
It's my pleasure. It really is. like I said earlier, this speaking and doing this is also a form has been a form of therapy for me. So it's important for me to talk about these things and get the word out and let people know. Um, Veterans have been on the cutting edge of technology since the Civil War, from early anesthetics to nowadays prosthetics, and I hope in the future um, that civilians are able to learn mental health stuff from us as well, because we're on the cutting edge of that now as well. Luckily.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So there are a lot of questions actually in the Q&A for you asking your advice for this crowd for therapists. So let me share some of the questions with you. Um, this one says, thank you, Sal, for sharing your heart with us today. Do you have any advice for therapists who are new to helping veterans on their healing journey?
Sure. Um, the most important thing for me, and I can only really speak for myself, was whenever it took me a while to find the right therapist. I went to the VA and tried to get stuff done, and all of those people just wanted to hand me pills and tell me that I was disturbed or broken in some way. And I'm a United States Marine. I'm not broken.
No, you're not.
I'm a resilient person. I'm a powerful person, and leading with these things probably not the best idea. It wasn't until I found my therapist and started talking about other things and really getting comfortable with Dr. Channing enough to be able to open up about the survivor's guilt and open up about the things that I was really dealing with. Um, that I became comfortable talking about that stuff with him. And so I guess the main thing is create a rapport, talk to the veteran about what they want to talk about, and gauge with or broach the subject with tenderness, but also the ability to go, okay, if you don't want to talk about that, that's fine. Let's move on and moving forward and just continuing the conversation. Because if you try and force it, we're going to stop talking and we're never going to see you again.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Right. So not viewing the veteran client as broken, of course, kind of not leading with a diagnosis and pathology, and letting the veteran lead the relationship. Sounds like are
Absolutely.
the main pieces. There are always questions, yes, about how therapists who aren't veterans themselves can relate better. I think sometimes therapists who are not veterans themselves worry that they don't use the right words or the right lingo or kind of know enough about a veteran's service to kind of have credibility. What can you say to those therapists who might be listening who are not veterans? Any specific advice to them?
The only thing is make sure you get the rank right, whether it be, and you don't even need to call them by their rank. Is hey Sal or whatever is perfectly fine. Um, but if you are going to address them as their uh, rank, make sure you get it right. Make sure you pronounce it correctly.
Mhm.
Um, and don't try and get any lingo in there. If you are a veteran, cool. Then you know the lingo and you can totally be on that level with the veteran. But it comes off as inauthentic
Okay.
when somebody tries to start bantering with the lingo and they just don't know what they're talking about. So
Mhm.
it's better to come into it and be like, I'm an ignorant party. I have no idea. Educate me. And that gets a lot of stuff out there because we love talking about our service. It's we don't join the military because we hate the bad guys. We join the military because we love our country, we love the military, and we love what we do.
Yeah.
So talking about what we did, that's definitely a way to get us to open up,
Yeah.
and learning about it is awesome.
Perfect. Thank you for that. While we're on the subject of kind of the words to use or to not use, you shared about your reaction to being called a hero. What would you say might be a better way for people to express their thanks and appreciation for your service?
A simple thank you for your service is great. A discount works even better, but but a simple thank you is all that's really necessary, because anything more than that and you run the risk of offending somebody, right? You call them a hero and all this other stuff, and it doesn't sit right to me. Now I understand. Now I'm so far past the trauma that I understand that people do view me in that light because I've done things that they could never even imagine doing. And so I'm a lot more comfortable with the term and being called that term nowadays, but it still doesn't quite sit right. I get a little wiggly on the inside.
Yeah. 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 I think people do it because they feel like thank you, that simple thank you that you're suggesting doesn't feel like enough to them. And then, yeah, they
I
say
promise you, it absolutely is.
it's enough.
And it just a simple thank you so much. You know, if you have a history, my grandfather was in the service or whatnot, you can share that.
Mhm.
But that is really all that's necessary. And we're not looking for anything more. Again, most of us feel like we were just doing our jobs. We don't feel like we're anything special or any better than anybody. And like myself, we tend to be uncomfortable with praise because there's not a
Mhm.
lot of praise in the military. There's a lot of you could do this better, you could do that better, and all that stuff. So, also giving us things to do is a great thing. Giving us things to work on when we're not in therapy is uh, awesome, because it gives us a mission. It gives us something to accomplish before the next time we come to therapy, and that always energized me. Whenever my therapist would give me a book to read or a lecture to listen to or something, I would be like, I came up, listen to Pema Chodron. I listened to Don't Bite the Hook, or I listened to, I read Thich Nhat Hanh's book, Pieces Every Step, or whatever in between the last time I saw you and now. And so we're goal oriented people. We like having a mission. We like having a job to do, and giving us something to do when we're not in therapy is a good tool, I think, to use.
Yeah. And check in on the mission, right? Therapists shouldn't give you an assignment and then not ask
Exactly.
questions about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, did you get a chance to read that book? Oh, yes. Or no, I didn't have that time. Okay, well, next time or whatever. It's fine. There's times where I showed up and I didn't do any work, and it just life got in the way. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's important, I think.
That's great advice. Thank you. And for framing it in that particular way, because sometimes therapists will give homework, and homework evokes being in school, which is not necessarily the brightest spot for people, but you're framing it as a kind of a between session mission.
Yeah.
Awesome. There's a question here, Sal, if you're willing to share. It says, can you speak more to your recovery efforts and ability to become sober? What advice do you have for clinicians to best serve veterans that are actively using and struggling with sobriety?
You can't lead a horse to water if it's not ready to drink. And if the veteran is not ready to quit self-medicating, continually harping on it is probably not the best thing to do. But if that veteran is ready to change and ready to make a change, there are tools. There's peer support, there's keeping themselves accountable, there's again, just having these small missions. Just you don't have to quit right away. You can draw it back, you can stop, you can switch from alcohol to beer, or you can um find alternatives to kind of replace these negative habits that we have. Um, for a while, I used marijuana. If you guys are in a place where that's legal, that's always kind of a thing that can replace the much more harmful drug that is alcohol, as I like to say. And Not that I'm for self-medicating. I'm clean and sober now. But baby steps is the important part. And for me, again, peer support was super helpful. It's also a way that I get other veterans to join Wounded Warrior Project. You know, a lot of men and women, they think Wounded Warrior Project is for folks like me who were severely wounded, who lost a limb or something. And no, we're for everybody. If you served post 9/11, you have access to everything that Wounded Warrior Project has to offer. And so when I talk to veterans that don't want to get involved because they're afraid of taking resources away from others, I say, well, if you're in such a good place that you don't need these resources, you can be a resource for other veterans. You can be a peer support leader or part of this peer support group that helps keep everybody accountable to themselves. And it's not like the military where we're like, well, it's a check-in. Hey, brother, how you doing? Hey, sister, what's going on? It's just a talk. And so again, that mission-oriented thing will get us there. A big roadblock that veterans run into, and I think that's why so many veterans take their own lives, is because they lose focus in life. They have no mission to move forward. And when I found my friends were struggling, I found a mission again to help these people get better. And that only grew with my participation in Wounded Warrior Project.
Yeah, having your community to serve is so healing. Yeah. I want to ask a question about the radical gratitude that has been so helpful to you that you shared with us. You said something so wise. I'm not sure you even realize how wise it sounded to me. I jotted it down. You said something like, knowing that you're lucky, regardless of how you feel about it. That really stuck with me, and I'm sure with others too. For veterans struggling with radical gratitude, do you have any advice on helpful tools for attaining it?
For me, I had to stop listening to my inner voice and start talking to myself, because my inner voice is always going to be negative. My inner voice is always going to tell me what kind of a piece of garbage I am and how much I drink and how much of my life I wasted and all these things. And that's kind of where people fall into the issues, is because they listen to that inner voice rather than talk to themselves and say, no, I've done this, I've helped this person, I've done this, and I'm a good person because of these one or two things. I helped this old lady cross the street, or I helped this person take their groceries to the car. Or it's really, you got to focus on talking to yourself. And when you talk to yourself, Marcus Aurelius wrote it in his memoir. I can't even remember what the book is called, but he talks about every morning getting up and counting your blessings and being able to see each day as a gift, because you might not get one tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So to close out our session, lots of people are asking for kind of reminders and direction about how to access your music. Sure. Maybe you could share about your website. Maybe you could also just share quickly a little bit more of the overview of how therapists could get their clients connected to Wounded Warrior Project.
Sure. Number one, if you have a post 9/11 veteran that served after 9/11, they can just go to woundedwarriorproject.org and get signed up really easily that way. There's a toll-free number that's open it's Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern time. And they can just call, and the person on the phone will guide them through all the steps. They can take a picture of their DD-214 and we'll get them signed up that way. We try and make it as painless as possible, because the VA is so not painless. So, as far as my music is concerned, you could just search my name, Sal Gonzalez, on any streaming platform on the planet, and it'll come up. My album is called Heroes, and it's a 5-song EP. You can listen to all my music. I should have more music out in the coming year, and actually I'm making my debut at the Grand Ole Opry in May. So I'll keep everybody posted. You can follow me on social media at Sal G Music on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and all the things that the kids do these days, because I have to.
Awesome. Well, Sal, it has been such a pleasure to have you here with us this morning. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and your music with us. This felt so inspirational, and we really appreciate you being here to start off this summit. Our next session will begin at 9:15 Central. So we'll see you over there. And in the meantime, again, Sal, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks a lot. See you guys later.